Behemoth.
Hey everyone, welcome to the second episode of this Discovering the World of Flash Through Developers' Eyes. And today we have a very special guest because Tyler Glaiel started young in his career as a developer, experimenting with Flash very early in his life. And the challenges he encountered while developing games and finding solutions kept him doing this for years, all the way until now. He developed tons of games in Flash and discovered how to access and stay in the gaming industry for a lot of years. And all of this by creating and learning while doing what he's the most passionate about, and that is making games. Thank you very much for joining us today, Tyler. How are you?
Doing pretty good. It's a little bit of a slow start, but
I know
nothing much going on right now.
It feels like every day is a slow start when you're working from home,
Yeah.
right? At least
Yeah.
it always takes a little bit extra to start. I know you guys have been pretty busy, but this is going to be hopefully an interesting conversation. We have a lot of things to go through, but before we move any forward and we get to know more of what you're doing or what you actually do, of course this series is about Flash, you know, and how we go with this back in the day, and we're talking a lot of years ago already. So if you can take us a little bit back in history, just to help us put things in perspective, how did you get started working on your first game? Was it your idea or someone else kind of invited you to a project and you jumped in with them?
Well, the first game that I made, I was 11 years old.
Wow.
I made it. And it was called Pigeon Pooper. And it was a Flash game. And you played as a pigeon and you pooped on things. Look, it's the type of game an 11-year-old would make, okay?
With the things you see today, that would be a hit for sure.
For sure. It was kind of amazing because I didn't really know what I was doing. I had a copy of Flash 4 that was borrowed from one of my dad's friends, who I guess worked as like a web developer or something like that. And so I borrowed a copy of Flash from him, and we would make little animations and stuff, which were all like little crappy animations. But at some point, Flash had a lot of stuff in it, like used to add tiny bits of interactivity to things, like mainly buttons. Like you could click a button and have an animation play, or like click a button and go to a different frame of the animation. And I figured out that you can move the buttons around in an animation. And so then if you click the button as it's moving around, you can have it go to like a you win screen. So it's kind of like that's a game. Like there's not really much involved in it, but that is by definition a game. And so that's what Pigeon Pooper was. The game was set to whatever Flash's default frame rate was, which was 24. And I'm pretty sure I animated it on 2s because I knew that was a thing that you did. So the animations were extremely choppy and crappy, and things would just basically jump around the screen and you had to click them. And then a little pigeon would follow your mouse, like just kind of as the mouse cursor. You'd click things and they would. No, that was it. That was the game. It was simple. There were like 10 levels or something. I was very proud of it. I burned it. I burned copies of it onto CDs and tried to sell them at my middle school with like a little printed label on, like glued onto the CD. And I sold like 8 copies of it.
Dude,
so I made like $40 or something.
That's so awesome. And you were 11, right? So you were still in school.
Yeah.
What else were you doing? Like, what games were you playing when you started messing up with Flash?
See, I was 11. That would have been like 2001. So I was probably playing early GameCube games. When did Wind Waker come out? 2002. So it's probably not quite Wind Waker, but I was probably playing the like pre-order disc from it or something. Playing some probably Sonic the Hedgehog games. Oh, yeah, it was that era. Also Pokemon for sure.
Obviously, everyone was playing that, right?
Yeah.
You started creating this. Did you share the knowledge, or did you find like a group of friends to, or just other people to start developing games or doing something a little bit more complicated, or it was just on your own, kind of your own solo adventure?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, when I was from like 11 to like 13, I was just doing it on my own. Like the games that I made weren't like good, objectively speaking. It was cool that I could make them, but they weren't good. And middle school, your friends in middle school are very hard to like impress.
Yes.
Because they'll be like, why don't you make a game like Halo or whatever? It's like, okay, all right, well, why don't I make a game like Halo? So you know, it took a long time before any of my friends in like middle or high school actually like acknowledged that I was making something cool. So for the most part, I was just making them on my own. But in probably 2003 or 2004, which would have been early high school for me, freshman year, I guess, I wanted to start posting some of the games that I made online, and I set up a website and put my games on it. It was a very ugly looking website, and then I was trying to get them approved for like, because you knew which websites would play, like you could play Flash games on, like Newgrounds and Albino Black Sheep, and like all those were like classics back in 2004, and I was like submitting them because most of them had submission forms and stuff. And when I submitted it to Newgrounds, it just kind of instantly showed up on the website, which was, you know, that was the gimmick of Newgrounds, was like you could post your stuff and it would just show up on the website, and it didn't have to be like approved by anyone, and people would vote on it and play it. And I got like 800 plays of the game that I uploaded there, just like within an hour of uploading it. I'm like, damn, that's pretty cool.
And that got you into doing another one, or kind of improving the
that got me into like Newgrounds, like the community in Newgrounds, because it was the only website that accepted the first game that I put on it. Like all the other websites just would ignore your email or just say no or whatever, because, you know, it wasn't a good game or anything. So then, you know, I got involved in like the community on Newgrounds, and there was like the whole like, you want to make a game that has like a high score when people vote like 0 to 5 on your games. Like you want to make a game that breaks your previous record of what your score was. So like my first game that I submitted there got like a 2.5 out of 5 or whatever. And then, you know, I'm like, okay, I can do better than 2.5 out of 5. Take a little better game and submit it, and then he gets like a 3 out of 5.
And would people also like give you feedback on the comments or things like that? Or
yeah, there would be lots of reviews. Most of them were, you know, what you'd expect out of the early internet. And, and I was a little bit confrontational about some of the people who were like posting low effort reviews, like, oh, this game sucks. Like, no, you suck. Like, okay, look, I was like 13 or 14.
Of course.
And, you know, that's just how I like that's how 13 and 14-year-olds use the internet. But like eventually I started making stuff that was getting positive feedback, and you know, it was a very big incentive to like make something better and improve. And I just kept doing that throughout high school, and kept making games that did better and better, and more people enjoyed and would get on like the front page and stuff. And it was a fun community to be a part of, because there were like forums, and you'd talk to people and share various things that you discovered that you could do in Flash. Like, oh, you can do this to do that, and you can change colors in a weird way by doing this instead of tinting things. All that type of stuff. So it was a very fun community to be part of.
That was actually one of my questions, because there's a lot of people that listen to us, you know, they probably hear us all the time talking about Newgrounds. They don't necessarily know what it meant for a lot of, you know, early developers, or even in this stage, like a young Tyler just improving and trying to become better. Is there anything that, of course, the community side from Newgrounds, it's important to mention, right? Feedback,
it's probably one of the most important parts, like the community aspect, where they're like it's not just you versus fans like it would be on like YouTube or whatever. Like Newgrounds fostered a creative community where all the creators would be friends with each other, and the fans and like the people who ran Newgrounds were also part of the community, which is not something that happens on like YouTube or whatever. Like most people on YouTube have a pretty adversarial relationship with the people who run YouTube. So the fact that you could like pretty easily get in contact with the people who ran Newgrounds, and you know, I had Tom Fulp on my AOL Instant Messenger friends list while I was like 15 or whatever, and I could chat with him if I needed to, which I did like every day until he switched his username. But yeah,
yeah, but I think that's something that I guess for a lot of us that joined later and maybe didn't know about this whole side of Newgrounds, that's very important, right? Because this kind of, it was just fostering between what later became full developers to share information and motivation and different aspects on how to create better games with the tools that were available back in the day, right? This is something that I've meant to ask, and I've asked others as well. But while you're a programmer now, at what point of all of this did you decide, okay, this is the path I want to follow? I guess you've been doing it for a while now, and
I've been doing it for
through, right?
Yeah, I just went with it. I mean, after making the Pigeon Pooper when I was 11, I'm like, oh, this is fun. Like, I was like, but you know, it was always like, you don't know how to turn that type of thing into a career very easily, but like, I had it figured out in high school just because once you, like, at some point you could actually start making money off of Flash games and with like sponsorships and advertisements and stuff. And probably like 2006 when that started like becoming a big thing. So I was still in high school, I was 16. I probably would have been a sophomore or a junior. And I started making games that would have sponsorships from, you know, Armor Games, Congregate, and Newgrounds sometimes. And advertisements on them, and you kind of got to learn when the stakes were low how to do that, how to handle the money side of things. Got it. Because that's not a thing that a lot of people are good at. You need practice to understand how to like negotiate stuff with people. You know, someone says, "I'll pay you $1,000 to make this game for me," or "I'll sponsor that game for $1,500 or whatever," and you kind of, you know, if you're a kid, you don't entirely understand the value of money, and you might think, well, that's a lot of money, I'll do that, and then it turns out to not be worth it, or it turns out that you got screwed in some way, and then you're like, okay, well, I know that next time I got to do this. Or it turns out that some website would have offered you 3 times as much money for the sponsorship, but you took one too early. Or, you know, maybe you were working with somebody who didn't appreciate the way that things were going and wanted to do something else with the game. And like, there was, you know, I made like 50 Flash games. So all these scenarios, you know, I had like a rapid fire course load with like everything that could go wrong with like a business or could go right, like happened over time periods of a week or whatever. So you learn all these lessons the hard way, but you're not putting that much time into them. So you know, you very quickly understand how to like value yourself and deal with the money side of things. So like once that started getting into full swing, was when it was pretty clear that I could turn this into a living in some sense of the word.
Got it. That's interesting. That's an interesting side of this whole thing, becoming more and more trending, and just more people getting involved. That's actually very interesting. Something that's, it's also, it's a kind of a different topic, but it's interesting, I guess, since you ended up becoming a programmer. If it wasn't for, let's say you wanted to do something like just a video game, but not in Flash, what other options did you have? Was it viable for you to make a game like this out of Flash?
Back then, probably not. Like I tried. You know, sometimes you'd see an advertisement for an actual game engine, which they, you know, they didn't have like Unity or Unreal available to everyday people back then. So there was some weird ones, and there were some various game making tools that I tried, and some of them were incomprehensible to someone who didn't have a lot of experience programming, and some of them were so incredibly basic that you couldn't really do anything interesting with them, and just Flash seemed like the best way to do things.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and that's kind of, you know, it's so different from what we have now, and like everything, it's out there for your creativity to just, you know, go crazy and do pretty much whatever you want if you find the right people, the right tools. But back in the day, as you said, you started, you know, playing with Flash, and then kind of by yourself you realize you could make a game. That's a very powerful tool, and I can only imagine your eyes shining and getting all, you know, like loving the process. That sounds like a great thing to discover.
Once you figure it out. And that's how a lot of early Flash games like worked. Like Flash wasn't a game making tool. Like I think the version that I started with was Flash 4, I think. I think that Pico School by Tom Falk was Flash 3, which didn't have a programming language in it at all. It was just buttons putting animations places. So at that era, like the only way that you were making games was by figuring out how to like abuse Flash into letting you make a game, like putting together the puzzle pieces in weird ways. So, you know, the fact that like it just had like a natural progression. Like you would use the program to like do stupid little animations of a stick figure's head exploding, and then you realize that, oh well, there's this thing in it which kind of almost could be turned into a game if you did this with it and then assemble it together like that. I mean, I did have a book full of tutorials on how to actually make games that after Pigeon Pooper came out, I read through and followed the tutorials so I could actually learn how to, program and stuff. But it also, there were a lot of sample, like, I think Flash 6 is when I actually started, like, doing actual programming in it. And it came with a CD full of, like, sample projects. And there were some games on there. And I would learn how to program by just opening up the sample projects, changing things in the code, and seeing what happens.
Oh,
so
reverse engineering the whole thing.
Yeah, it was experimenting with stuff. That type of environment is pretty fun to work with.
Yeah, I bet. And all the crazy things that you were seeing out there, and now how can you include those in my game? Those kind of thoughts, those that keep you awake at night. Used to thinking on getting back to the computer next morning and adding it to the next game.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about Closure, which was, I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the first game that you ended up kind of porting to consoles and PC later on. But it all started in Flash. And by the way, I have to say, I love the mechanic of the game. It's kind of, you look at it and it's like so simple. But I can only imagine how you came up with that idea for Closure.
Yeah. So Closure, it was my first commercial game. The version, it wasn't like a port to consoles. We basically made a new game entirely. Like we made a full version of like the Flash version I consider is to be like a prototype or a sample. And then we took the concept and made a full version out of it. But the Flash game was interesting because Flash was adding some features that were kind of experimental, like nobody was using them, and they added one that was it's a very technical thing, but like I think most gamers have heard of shaders since that's a term that they use in the settings of games a lot, which is just basically a fancy name for like visual effects, kind of. So Flash added something that was kind of like shaders into their engine as like an experimental feature, and I was playing around with it. I think I was the only one who was playing around with it, because to this day I think that Closure and like one other game I made are the only games that actually used this feature. But I was playing around with the thing that would just turn a colored image into pure black and white, with some like thresholding stuff, because you could do some interesting effects that way. And I was playing around with what it would look like with like different types of art underneath, and found all these interesting little ways to do lighting in cool ways. And then it was just like, hey, you should turn this into a game, and the concept of why not just have it like only what you can see be what you stand on. Like, it's hard to like explain where these ideas come from, because it's just like, you go through 100,000 ideas in your head, and when you try something it doesn't work, and you try something it doesn't work, and then you try something like, oh, that one's kind of cool. Like the idea comes out of nowhere, but it's
from everything.
Yeah, it's from everything.
Yeah, it makes sense.
You try a bunch of things. Sometimes I don't even need it. Sometimes I can just tell in my head that something's not going to work, and I don't even try it. But you just have a lot of ideas and then do something.
Yeah.
So yeah, that Flash game got a lot of attention. It was clear that we had, like, I think it took 2 months to make the Flash game, and it was clear that we had like a cool concept that we could do a lot more with. Yeah, we started working on that. I was working with John Shuby, also known as Star Ogre on Newgrounds, and we were working on turning Closure into a commercial game while we were we didn't go to the same college, but we were both the same age, so we were both like sophomores in college, freshmen and sophomores in college when we were working on this, pulling together an interesting little prototype of like a full version of it, which was not made in Flash. It was made with C++ and a custom engine. And then we started winning awards for it, and then after that, we were talking to the Behemoth about funding it, and then we both dropped out of college to once we secured the funding from the Behemoth, we dropped out of college to work on it for another year as like a professional thing.
Now it's still available on PlayStation and also on Steam, right?
Yeah, it's on Steam. It's on PlayStation 3. I don't know how much longer the PlayStation 3 store is going to be up for. It's still selling occasional copies on it, which is kind of funny. Like I get an email once a quarter from PlayStation saying, "Oh, you've earned $30 off of closure on the PS3 store. It's like, okay. I wonder who's still buying it on PlayStation 3.
And the PlayStation 3.
We're up to PlayStation 5 now. Like,
yeah, I know. We're skipping 2 generations. You know, there's still people out there, and you know, there are some cool concepts from the Flash games that sometimes we kind of forget about. We're drowned in this, you know, sea of sometimes complex gameplay, and there's people that is looking for something simple that they can just that you can just grab, sit for a couple minutes, and then go do something else, and then come back to it, or even play with your kids, or you know, your younger sister or brother or whatever. And that's when games like this can help tremendously. And there are a ton of games out there. So if for you guys that are listening, haven't or don't know about Closure, if you have your PC, of course, go to Steam, check it out. It's really a cool concept, and it's not, you know, it's those games where you can grab and after a couple minutes you know what to do, but the game's just getting more difficult and more difficult as you progress, but with the same mechanics, right? So you're not, you don't need to start smashing your controller to be able to jump a trillion times. No, you just need to understand how it works, think, and go through it. So it was really, definitely a really interesting game. Recommend you guys to go check it out. Before we move into the final on what you're doing currently and what's kind of for your future, I wanted to quote a tweet that I promise is not problematic, but I think it's interesting maybe that we use this space to explain to people how this works, because the main reason why we're doing this series is because Flash is no longer playable in browsers, but that doesn't mean that it's the end of Flash, right? Actually, at the Behemoth, we still use Flash for like animations and arts. So I'm gonna quote your tweet here, so maybe you can explain to the audience what's going on here. So your tweet said, trying to explain to people that only the Flash Web plugin died. Flash, the authoring tool, still exists, renamed to Animate, and my game engine only depends on the Flash file format, not any of the runtimes, so I am literally not affected by the Flash Player Web plugin dying. So what's going on here? And it's dying, is it not? Can I use it? Can we not use it? What's happening here?
All right. Well, first of all, a lot of this is Adobe's fault for naming everything related to Flash, and not actually having a distinction. But I mean, okay, to be fair, they changed the name of the Flash program to Animate, which makes sense, but nobody calls it Animate. Everybody still calls it Flash because that's what it was called for 20 years. But all right, so when Flash died, which is how everybody colloquially refers to it as Flash dying, what that means is that you can't run Flash files in Google Chrome anymore. Like Google shut it off. If you try to visit a website that has Flash files, it's just not going to run them. That's what Flash dying means. You can still download the Flash files and you can run them on your desktop if you have a Flash player installed, which I believe Adobe still offers a standalone Flash player for that. Or you could download, I guess Flashpoint probably has a copy of the standalone Flash player installed. But either way, it's like, as long as you, it's just the website, just Google Chrome blocks Flash files now. I don't know why they have to do that. They could, there's no reason why they have to block Flash files. They just wanted to kill it. They could just not include the plugin and still let you install the plugin if you wanted to. Either way, it's just the website plug. The authoring tool, which is Adobe Animate, still works. You can still do animations in Adobe Animate. There's still people using Adobe Animate. There's still people using it for actual television shows and Netflix shows and stuff. That still exists. And then the Flash file format, which is SWF files, is what Animate exports to. It's one of the things Animate exports to. That is just a file format like JPEG or PNG. It's just a description of everything in that file format is all the data that you need to run a Flash animation. It's in that file format. The thing is that my game engine loads Flash files, but it's not using anything from Adobe. I'm not running Flash player to decode them or anything. It's all my own code. So as long as I can still create Flash files or SWF files from Adobe Animate, I can still use those files in my engine regardless of anything that Adobe does, because I'm not using any Adobe code or programs for this. So you can still, like, I'm pretty sure the Behemoth does something similar as well. They might have an intermediate step where they run them through a converter first or something. There's a number of game developers who have something similar to this on their internal art pipeline. Mine is special because it doesn't require any intermediate steps. I just, click publish in Flash and it shows up in game instantly. It's a very, if you're trying to do animations like that 2D Flash style of animations, it makes sense to use Flash for that.
Okay.
But yeah, it's just, people have a misconception over it, and I constantly have people asking like, oh, is your game still going to work even though Flash died? I'm like, well, yeah, like there's nothing that Adobe can do to make my game not work, because I'm not using anything in my game that like Adobe has any control over whatsoever. It's all mine.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Tranquility for everybody. All those games are going to still work.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you guys have listened to other of our episodes, you know that there is something going on, so you can still play those Flash games in a browser. It's gonna take a little bit for all the games to be included, but at least some of them are already there and they're working. So Tyler, just to close things out, what are you currently working on, and where can people find you to get to know you more and your work?
The best place to keep up with my work is on my Twitter, which is @TylerGlaiel. And what I'm working on currently is I'm currently working on a game called Mugenics, which was in limbo for a long time. It wasn't originally my project, but it got canceled, and then me and Ed revived it recently, and we started working on it last year for like the current version of it that we, there was some pre-production on it in years earlier than that, but like we officially started actually working on it last year, and then of course there was like a pandemic that kind of slowed everything down. Yeah. But I'm working on that now. It's going to be a gigantic game. It's not anywhere close to being done yet. It's still like 2 years away at least, but it's a gigantic project, and it's going to be pretty awesome.
Can't wait. Really can't wait. That's all that I have. Tyler, you want to say anything else to the people that is listening to this podcast right now?
I think that about covers it.
That's gonna be it for this episode then. Thank you very much, Tyler, once again. And for everyone listening, there are more episodes coming, so stay tuned for more of those, and hopefully you're enjoying so far. Thank you very much for listening, and wish you all a very good rest of your day, or good night, or good morning, wherever you're listening. Bye bye.